Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Gibraltar, sort of doing re-reviews of these Research Bureau ships in 2025. This ship available for 159,000 research points. That's a lot of regrinds to get this ship, so we're going to see if it's worth picking up here in 2025. Gibraltar is a little bit less unique these days, thanks to Monmouth being released. However, after playing Gibraltar, especially after playing Monmouth for its initial release, I think Gibraltar is just a lot better than Monmouth, personally. This ship is absolutely crazy. The AP here is so consistent. It is so nice to use. Assuming you land the salvo, that's the big issue here, is your shell velocity. Assuming you land that, though, yeah, it's just, 12,500 damage off a destroyer. Of course, Elbing is one of the largest destroyers in the game, so maybe not that special, but I think you should really pay attention to our destroyer salvos throughout this entire video. It is ridiculous how consistently this AP demolishes lightly armored targets. It almost needs nothing to fuse on this AP. These short fuses are really, really nice. Some of the shortest fuses in the game. It arms on 12 millimeters of armor and has a fuse time of 0.005 seconds. That's some of the best in the entire game. Your pen angles are also massively improved, 60 to 75 degree pen angles on this. So even with this Colbert trying to angle to us, we're just going to be getting a ton of full pens. Of course, these 234 mil guns mean you overmatch a pretty good amount of armor. 16 millimeters, that's pretty common for these light cruisers. So that's another 9k salvo at 15 kilometers angled. It is awesome. Even Des Moines does not have these pen angles. Monmouth does not either. That ship is more of a long-range focus ship, I guess we could say, but it has 60 to 68 degree pen angles. Still improved, but not quite like Gibraltar. And that's what I really noticed while playing this ship, especially after that initial Monmouth release recently. The guns here are way more consistent into all manner of targets. You do not have the pen. You do not have the longer fuse times that leads to more consistent citadels into heavily armored targets. But against lightly armored targets, which, let's remind ourselves, that includes superstructures on battleships, upper belts on a lot of cruisers, light cruisers, you just don't have to deal with overpens. It is so nice. And you still retain pretty good pen. These shells are really, really good as long as you're not aiming specifically for citadels into these heavily armored battleships or heavy cruisers. That is the one downside relative to Monmouth. Outside of shell velocity, there's a few ships in this game, tier 10 cruisers, that have these 234 millimeter main guns. We have Goliath, we have Prins Oranje, Gibraltar, and Monmouth. And they're all quite similar to one another as far as the gun characteristics go. Goliath shares Gibraltar's shell velocity, and that's the big downside here. Out to 15 kilometers, if you're trying to land these shells, you gotta lead quite far, since you have a 9.7 second flight time to 15. That is not great. Prins Oranje and Monmouth have an 8.2 second shell flight time to 15 kilometers. And it's noticeable. It really is. Much more consistently able to land my shells with those other two. Gibraltar, you will struggle to lead these shells, but once you get the aim down, the actual shell characteristics are just so much better. The AP especially. You don't have HE. That is a big downside to this ship, but considering how strong this AP is, I didn't mind all that much. I found overall, I liked Gibraltar a lot more than Monmouth, which I was really surprised about. I had a pretty okay time in Monmouth. The extra range on Monmouth, the shell velocity there, I thought would lend itself better to this very passive meta, and yet I had a great time playing Gibraltar. Perhaps that comes down to its consumable kit as well as a little bit better armor on this ship. You have smokes. You don't have that in the Monmouth, so you can set up in places to farm, but also you can use your smokes to get out of bad situations. We can take a lot of focus in this ship. We have quite a bit of HP. We have some heals as well. No super heal on this one, but still regular heals are quite nice, and 40 millimeters of deck plating means that you don't have to worry as much at those longer ranges, assuming you're angled, about those battleships. I mean, another massive salvo to finish off that Colbert. With this AP, it really does feel like you're almost playing a sap ship that the sap can also citadel lightly armored targets. It is that consistent. I really, really did enjoy that. Unfortunately, our AA is quite terrible. Perhaps not a surprise, you're a surface ship. You're going to struggle against the aircraft in this game. Unfortunately, that is the way of things. But I would say Gibraltar is especially bad. Out of those ships I already mentioned, Goliath, PVO, Monmouth, you have the worst AA out of all of them. So you're going to definitely struggle against these carriers. Fortunately, we do have a smoke to help us out of those situations if the carrier does decide to focus on us and we do start taking a lot of damage. We can usually escape. Carriers, if they really want to get you, they'll start blind dropping you. It's disgusting, really. But that is what Wargaming has admitted with this game is a problem. However, they have not, so far, been able to fix it, unfortunately. But that's not a big deal, because every ship struggles with that. That's not especially bad for Gibraltar. As for how unique Gibraltar is, I think it's a relatively unique experience playing this one. I've been going over these Research Bureau ships, and generally I would say most of them, you can just have a better or equivalent playstyle available for free in the tech tree. Don't have to grind nearly as far to actually get those experiences. The vast majority of these Research Bureau ships are not all that different from ships that are readily available in the basic tech tree. Gibraltar is a little bit different. This ship just does not have very many similar ships as far as the playstyle goes. You have a smoke and you can farm from smoke. There's plenty of cruisers that do that. Typically though, not with this large a caliber of guns. We have plenty of cruisers with large caliber, hard-hitting, consistent AP. But they don't have these smokes or the incredibly short fuse times that make it almost play like a sap ship, like a Venezia. When I'm fighting these destroyers, I almost feel like I'm as dangerous as a Venezia against them. That's how good this AP is. Look at this. Front guns only 4 pens. That's nearly 8,000 damage off of Marceau. And he's relatively angled to us. It is so good at that, and yet you're still incredibly dangerous to broadside cruisers. That's not a very unique characteristic. Most cruisers, most ships in this game are very good at taking out broadside cruisers. Perhaps that was one of my main critiques of the Monmouth, was that it was so good into broadside cruisers in particular at longer ranges that that's really all it did, and that wasn't terribly unique because most ships are good at that. Gibraltar has more ships that it counters more effectively, destroyers in particular. We don't have a radar to impact those engagements, but just the sheer amount of damage the ship is capable of dealing, as well as having a lot of HP. I'm not going to say it's tanky, because if you go broadside, you're going to get one shot. Citadel is very vulnerable, but you can survive a long time with this ship thanks to the okay armor, but high HP pool, and most importantly, a smoke. Not a lot of heavily armed cruisers like this one with large, consistent guns have the ability to stay in the fight at closer ranges, which Gibraltar can do thanks to its smoke. Obviously, islands, great for pushing up and getting these closer range salvos, but just having a smoke opens up a whole world of possibilities on maps that aren't as favorable. Towards the end of this video, I will have an example of that where we play a very, very open flank and are able to still lock it down even against overmatching battleships thanks to having this smoke screen. Yep, that was 16,000 damage. Shell velocity slow, man, but wow, the damage here is incredible. Obviously, we don't have HE, which means we don't have fires to farm these battleships with. So as far as getting insane damage numbers, it might be a little bit less than you're used to if you're used to farming with some of these heavier cruisers, because fires account for a lot of damage at higher tier here. Fires tick for a lot against these high tier battleships, but the damage you're dealing is so much more effective. The Gibraltar damage here is, well, 50% healable for most ships, if that. And that's just because it's all going to be full pen damage. We're overmatching through into this Minotaur. I mean, it's quite good. I will say, though, it is a hard ship to play in today's meta because people aren't playing at closer ranges. That's the downside here. I've been singing Gibraltar's praises partially because I had a really good time in it, but partially because in the past, I don't think I've given this ship its proper credit for being such a strong tier 10. I think in the past, I have a general feeling that I did not like this ship in the past. I did not play it very much at all, and I just generally did not enjoy it. But this time, playing it maybe a little bit different playstyle, trying to push in, play more aggressive, find those lightly armored ships, especially going after those destroyers. I mean, double Citadel, 22k into that Minotaur. I just found it to be so convenient how consistent this AP is, and it hit incredibly hard into almost every ship I was going for. You're not going to be citadeling heavily armored cruisers at longer ranges. You're not really going to be citadeling battleships at all. But you're getting so much damage consistently into their upper belts, as well as being able to do a ton into these destroyers. It does really, really good work there. However, this is a ship that I do not have on my main account, and I don't think I will be buying on my main account. There are some big weaknesses to this ship that I do need to talk about. While I did have a good time in it, there are other ships that can do this playstyle, as well as ships that are just better into today's meta of long range. I don't necessarily blame people for being passive, considering the type of ships Wargaming is introducing these days, how carriers and subs function, and just in general. But it happens a lot where the battleships and everyone just sits at the back of the map. It is just simply out of your range, out of your effective range even. If you take range mod, the shell velocity here is too low, I think, to take range mod a lot of the time. And I was playing aggressive, trying to get in range of these guys to deal some damage, and suddenly we're spotted in our smoke. Hold on a second, I did the smart thing. I waited for my smoke until I knew someone was spotting for me. Well, yeah, it's a pretty big mistake I'm making. Your smoke fire detect is rather large on this ship. Notice the mini-map there. The enemy gearing is well within our smoke fire detection range. So we stay spotted and we're going to go down. And that's okay. But it is something you have to worry about when playing a ship that has an effective range of like 10 to 14 kilometers is where you want to be with this ship. That is a very narrow window to be playing in such a passive meta these days. That is a big issue with the Gibraltar. And that's where something like Monmouth, which is kind of similar to this ship, is going to do a lot better. It has way more range alongside having much, much better shell velocity. You do have a lot more DPM though. I've talked about this ship feeling a lot like a SAP ship in its consistency, and alongside that, you have just really, really high AP DPM here. You have 306,000 AP DPM base, which is really, really high, especially if we think about how consistent it is. This isn't exactly a fair comparison, but you can think of it like this. Des Moines HE DPM is 274,000. You have almost that, you don't quite have that consistency, but you almost have that consistency, and yet it is going to be better than its HE. Des Moines AP DPM though is 490,000, so you're not comparing with that, but you do have a smoke, which Des Moines doesn't, allowing us to play on this off flank here, where our friendly Preußen, Schlieffen, Yamato, very passive. The enemy battleships, I mean the Thunder, sprinted away from us at the start of this game. This is what you have to deal with in the tier 10 meta these days. It is difficult, but we have smokes to help make up for that. And when people are in range, using our concealment, which is solid, if not amazing, but good enough, we can use our concealment to get into really advantageous positions to find those broadsides and deal a lot of damage relatively quickly thanks to this good DPM. I would highly, highly recommend you play this ship for those positions. Try to find the broadsides. Don't just set up against all the bow-on enemy ships and try to farm them from your smoke. I don't think you're going to get great results out of Gibraltar like that, and perhaps that's what I was doing in the past. Maybe I put more effort into my positioning instead of just outright trying to click mouse button 1 all game and hoping for good damage that way. This ship needs to find those broadsides. Even slightly angled ships will still take a lot more damage than if they're fully angling to you. This AP still will bounce and still won't do nearly the damage when the enemy ships are angled. But if you can find those broadsides and even slightly angled cruisers, I mean, this Hindenburg is going to take some massive hits from us later on in this battle. But another big downside that I have not mentioned yet, that is a real weak point, is going to be your firing angles. This ship has a very vulnerable citadel. It's got a lot of HP, it's got a 40 mil deck armor, 30 mil upper belts, but you got to show a ton of broadside to actually fire your main guns. So for Gibraltar, that's going to look like 37-degree forward firing angles and 45-degree kiting angles. Not good. You do a lot of damage when you are actually firing all of your main guns. That is another 12k salvo into that Hindenburg. The damage was just so consistent, but you got to be very careful in your positioning. You got to be very careful in your angling. It's not an easy ship to play, especially with the relatively low range of this ship. You've only got 16.9 kilometers of main gun range. That is fine, but your shell velocity means that even at 16 kilometers, it's hard to hit targets at those longer ranges. So you're going to struggle into today's passive meta. But I had fun with it. Overall, I was surprised, actually, with Gibraltar. I had a good time playing Gibraltar here, and I was surprised at how consistent this AP was. Again, I think more than likely if I was to go back and look at my past videos on this ship, I probably was just not putting enough effort into finding good positions to actually use this AP. Maybe I wasn't pushing up enough to help on these destroyer engagements, really letting that short fuse AP shine into those destroyer engagements. Like another massive, consistent salvo into another destroyer, even a Shima, right? Like the Elbing is a large DD that from that initial game, but a Shima is a very small destroyer, and yet we're still just getting such consistent full pens on him. Again, this match, another blowout. I, again, don't blame people for running, but that is what you have to deal with, and Gibraltar is really not good into those scenarios. There's another Citadel from that Petro, just barely managed to not die there. The ship is quite vulnerable when it's broadside, but when you get into those right positions, and especially into lightly armored ships, maybe I'm just so used to overpetting them with battleships that it felt so good to have such consistently high damage salvos into these light cruisers and destroyers. So I guess the best way to put it is this feels like a unique experience, and maybe that's the best thing I could say about a Research Bureau ship. Whether or not it's an interesting ship to you, well, that's subjective, of course, but at least with this one, it does offer a unique playstyle. This one can be grind for free. You don't have to pay like you did with Monmouth and how expensive that one was. It takes a long time to get research points. I understand that, but at least in this case, it is a unique heavy cruiser that has incredibly consistent main guns that you just have to worry about surviving at those ranges where the guns actually are effective. I really would not recommend you run range mod. It is just far too floaty on the main guns. And 19.5 is good range, and sure, you can smoke up and farm, but actually hitting targets at those longer ranges, you're not going to get that much damage, I don't think. At least I wasn't able to do it myself. Perhaps that's your skill issue, fair enough. But I think you're better served by running reload mod and taking a little bit more time to position your ship closer to the enemy to really maximize some of those closer range salvos. With that, you're also going to get more damage in on those destroyers, which help your XP and win rate way more than farming a little bit of extra damage on those long-range salvos into battleships. With this build, we get the 4 smokes here. Very standard smokes here. They're good enough. They're not any short burst smokes, but they work. And having 4 of them is good for those longer games. You do want to have those extras available to you. Having a 5-kilometer hydro here is quite nice. I don't think you're going to use it to be spotting ships very often, but always having a hydro with your smoke is just another way that the ship feels comfortable to play. You don't have to worry then when that's up that you're just going to get torped out in your smoke. Very common for those destroyer players to torp your smoke. Having a standard repair here is a downside relative to Monmouth, of course. We also have less Citadel repair than the Monmouth does, as well as Goliath too. So Gibraltar really will get punished a lot harder for eating Citadel damage, but you have a little bit better armor. This ship does have the improved acceleration, so again, no prop mod here. Obviously going full conceal, but we still only have 11.5, which is good, especially for these guns. But you're not actually going to be sneaking up on a lot of those light cruisers, which is a good thing as well. Having this consistent of a main gun against light cruisers and outspotting them might not be the most fun experience for those light cruisers. This is the build that I went with here, wanting our consumables back quicker. Those smokes can be your lifeline. I didn't run into it too often, but I was worried about my rudder being jammed sometimes and that leading to our death. So I ran last stand. I had an extra point to throw into it. Our turret traverse, 25.9 seconds with this build. You could buff that with Grease the Gears, but I didn't find it to be too bad. Since we only have AP, there's not a lot that we're taking to buff the guns. So taking a free upgrade here with heavy AP seems reasonable. We could buff our HP more if you're finding yourself dying a lot more often and, well, not needing as much damage. Then I would suggest going Survivability Expert over Super Heavy AP. It will add a lot of HP to your ship because then it stacks with the flag as well. Obviously going Concealment, and I found the Dispersion to be good enough that I didn't need Outnumbered, and I'd rather go top grade for the situationally better reload. Just to show you here, this ship can get quite a lot of HP out of taking Survivability Expert, so getting up to 67,000 there. It's a lot of HP for a heavy cruiser to have, and that 40 mil deck armor. Yes, very vulnerable Citadel, but 30 mil upper belt is good enough. But crucially, that 40 mil deck armor means that at longer ranges, if those camping battleships are going to be sniping at you, if you angle it, you will be auto bouncing the AP off your deck armor. Still, some weird things can happen, obviously, with a ship this large with this large of a Citadel, but the armor here isn't too bad, and that is an upgrade over the Monmouth. Unfortunately, we don't have the torps that Monmouth does have. I don't see that as much of a downside, though, because, again, I don't think we're typically playing at those closer ranges, and we really want to stay around that 10 to 15 kilometer range is our window where we're at our best. Too close, and obviously the guns perform pretty well, but we can die rather quickly at those closer ranges. Otherwise, as the ranges get too far, suddenly we're much less effective because it's just so hard to lead these shells. As always, though, let me know what you think in the comments down below if you're interested in getting the Gibraltar. You can find some other opinions on this ship down there. It's a weird ship. It's a unique playstyle. Maybe not worth getting, but that's going to be up to you. Personally, I doubt I'm going to buy it on my main account, but I will say I was pleasantly surprised while playing this ship, and overall I had a pretty good time with it. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.